Ken Glass. Ken is the owner, the proprietor of the Brattle Bookshop, downtown Boston. This is a memorable year for them. This is 200th year they've been in operation. They're one of the oldest bookstores in the country. Ken and his father have been, his father took ownership in 1949. And I just want to say that I used to go to that bookstore probably in the late 70s, 80s, or thereabouts. And I remember when Ken's father was sitting there, it was George, he was sitting there behind the desk, the counter, surrounded by books. I always wondered how he got back there. And I remember Ken. He was a lot younger, like I was a lot younger. But Ken is very noted in the book circles. He's been on the Antiques Roadshow. He's done work for universities and colleges. He's been on the book, Antiquarian Book Association for New England. He's been the president. So we're really honored to have him because he has such a knowledge, not only of books, but the world of books, and has such a knowledge of the history of books in Boston. So please join me with a warm welcome to Ken.
Thank you. Good. The light, it's bright.
And just for food disclosure, just we're very thankful to have Walpole Media TV is filming us tonight. But just know that if you ask questions, that you're on the air. So just for food disclosure. But we're thankful for Tamara Green, who's the director, and for our person here tonight. I know him, and his name just escaped me. But we're thankful for you to actually filming us.
First of all, if I don't use the mic, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is there anyone who can't?
Actually, right now, the mic is helping.
If I always ask. Any case, what I do in the talk will last about 45 minutes or so. The first half hour, I'll talk about some of the history of the store, places that we've gone, books that I've seen, and just general things about the store. I'll also talk a little about, I hope all of you watch Antiques Roadshow, how that works and what a day can be like on Antiques Roadshow. Then what I like to do after that is maybe about 10 minutes of question and answer, because I can go on and on and on and on about old books, and at least with question and answer, I can go on about what you want to listen to. The last minute or two of the talk, I'll end with a couple of last stories, and that's one of the things I basically do, is just tell stories about all of these events and happenings. When the formal part of the talk ends, I'll go to the back, or whatever makes sense. I'll appraise any and all books that you bring. I do it in no order. The less order there is, the faster it goes. And quite honestly, my wife says that now that I'm getting a little older, I only work half a day. I get into work at 5:30 in the morning. The store closes at 5:30. It's 12 hours. It's half a day. And when I'm doing this, it's even extended a bit. So basically, I want to get home too. But I will do any and all, and I'm happy to do it for you. I guess the first thing that comes up when you talk about the store is, yes, it's been in my family since 1949. The history going back 200 years goes back with several families and so on. But what it is now, my father was getting married. My mother had $500. With that $500, they bought half interest in the Brattle Bookshop, which was literally going out of business at the time. My father didn't have a job, so we decided to take over a business that was going under. And the store has always been in Boston. We get loads of calls. People are in Harvard Square on Brattle Street saying, "Where are you?" We tell them we're downtown. When my parents first bought the store, there was a little side street in what was Scully Square called Brattle Street. And to make it even more confusing, the street doesn't exist anymore. It's where Boston City Hall Plaza is and City Hall now. And I've literally been doing this all my life. My parents say my first word was book. I don't know, maybe it was. I'm sure they were talking about them all the time. And I've worked after school in elementary school, junior high school, summers during college. I have a degree in chemistry from the University of Massachusetts. I was going to get a doctorate at the University of Wisconsin, but in 1973, I needed a year off. My father's health wasn't that good. That year now has been over 50 years, and I don't regret for a minute that I'm doing this and wasn't in a laboratory all my life. And a lot of the fun of the books is going out to the houses and estates. I was in New Hampshire this morning looking at an estate. I'm going to Essex tomorrow. It's literally almost every day. It's almost like being Jim Hawkins on Treasure Island. Every day, never knowing who you're going to meet, what you're going to see, the people, the characters, and so on. And again, I'll go over some of the situations. And actually, some of the characters sometimes aren't just the people we see, the customers, the houses we go to, but it's the people who work for us. Matter of fact, when I first started working for my father, which was 73, and I was really starting to take over because of his health, I hired an employee. He had been in the store, worked for us for a day or two. And after that day or two, a man came into the store and he asked for an author, a relatively obscure author, novelist called Donifred Yates. I knew who he was. I said, we'll go over and look for him. And of course, this was 50 years ago. He was an older man, probably younger than I am now. But anyways, he was an old man looking for this author. We went over, we looked for it, and we didn't have any. At the time, we had index cards. We kept people's names if they wanted. I said, "Do you want to leave your name?" He said, "No, but maybe I'll check again." He left. My new employee goes to me, "Does that man come in often?" And I said, "No, I wasn't really paying attention, but no." He goes, "Oh, well, that was J.D. Salinger. I used to date his daughter." And this employee worked for us for a long time, but a few days later, my wife, the way she likes to say it was, she worked for the Boston's local professional basketball team. In any case, we had 4 tickets to the Celtics. And I said, "Hugh, do you want to go to the game? We have a couple of extra tickets." He said, "Sure." But this introduction is one of the most memorable introductions. And I'm still talking about it. It's 50 years later. In any case, he said, "Yeah, but I'm going to go with somebody. Just give me the tickets. We'll meet you there." We got there. He was sitting there with a woman. And my wife and I come in, and we're about to sit down. He goes, "Oh, I'd like you to meet my wife, Mickey. We're getting divorced tomorrow." What do you say to an introduction like that? And let's put it this way. He worked for us for almost 15, 18 years, and nothing ever changed. It went on. But again, one of the fun parts about the bookstore is going out to houses and estates. And I'll tell a few stories of the places we've been, and then I'll tell a few stories about other things. But I got a call. I was out of the store, and this was, some of these were a while ago. But anyways, I got a call. When I got back, there was a message that Mrs. Fisher had called, and she had some books. I called her up, and she said, "Oh, yes, my father died in Providence. He has 500 art reference books. We want to get a number of people down to bid on them, but would you be interested?" Well, Providence is only an hour away. I mean, we go all over the Northeast, all over New England. An hour really isn't much. In any case, we said, fine. They lived on an old street called Benefit Street up near Brown University. I got to the house. It was a large old colonial house. Got led through the house into a courtyard, into a garage. Second floor of the garage, they had 4,000 books. Well, it turned out her married name was Fisher. Her father's name was John Nicholas Brown. Family founded Brown University, one of the wealthier families in the country. And after about 6 months, I bought 80% of the books I wanted. She was happy, I was pleased. And she said, my mother has a lot of books. Most are being given to the university. Some are being sold at auction, but would you like to go to Newport to take a look at the books there? Well, their house in Newport is one of the mansions on the ocean. I mentioned this to my wife. She decided to come with me on this deal. And one of the fascinating parts about it was being in one of those mansions in Newport that was still being lived in by a family. And at one point, wandering from the basement to the attic, all on my own, without a tour guide saying, come here, go here, do this. And it was just fascinating just being in one of those mansions and wandering through it. Another time I got called to Newport to do an appraisal. Now, when I come to groups like this or do the Antiques Roadshow or all day long at the store or emails, we do free evaluations, appraisals, and so on. But there are times when people need very formal written appraisals for insurance, estate taxes, whatever. Then I discuss a fee. But in any case, another mansion in Newport, not quite as big as the Browns, but this was the Perry family. Commodore Perry, Oliver Hazard Perry. And what they had was a whole stack of papers from the War of 1812. During the war, their family were privateers. Well, they're privateers if you're on our side. They're pirates if you're on the other side. It's all the way you look at it. But it was a day-to-day accountings of the ships. And they would sometimes capture a ship and realize tens of thousands of dollars profit. In 1812, that was an incredible amount of money. Then one of the days, one of the ships got into a battle. The ship got hit. The captain got hit. He lost his leg. 3 days later, at the bottom of a page in a small entry was, Captain, $5 bonus, loss of leg. And that was the last you heard of the captain. So it's changed a little nowadays, too. And when my father was still alive, and he died in the mid-'80s, we got a call from a lady. She was very vague about her name, who she was, what she had, but it sounded like there might be something interesting. She lived in Sharon, so it wasn't that far to go. We got to the house. It was a small ranch house. Paint was peeling, weeds were growing, and you sort of say, what's going to be here? She answered the door. She was quite elderly. We walk in, and there were just gorgeous antiques everywhere. I mean, really, really beautiful antiques. Turns out she was originally from the Boston area, but she had married the Prince of the Ukraine, the cousin of the Tsar of Russia. He had escaped just before the revolution, and she told story after story about being Russian nobility in Europe, all the court intrigues, all the goings-on, how T.E. Shaw used to stay at her house all the time, how she didn't think he accidentally died on a motorcycle, but there was a lot more to it. T.E. Shaw, of course, was Lawrence of Arabia. And she went on and on and on with these wonderful stories. Turned out her books were lousy, but the stories were absolutely wonderful. But when we first got into the house, on one of the walls, she had 10 watercolors, probably about this size, but watercolors. And they were pastoral European scenes. And when I first walked in and saw them, I thought they were nice. But the more she talked, the longer we were there, the more I looked at them, the nicer I thought they were. And I finally said, those 10 watercolors are really nice. And she turned around and said, oh, yes, they're all Turners. So she had probably $1 million worth of, and it was like, so you never know the people, the places, the characters. Matter of fact, speaking of characters, we one time went to one of our customers' 100th birthday parties. Now, when you go to a man's 100th birthday parties, and he tells you he just got back from Barcelona, he's going to give a talk in Florida, he's been asked to lecture in Tokyo. And I finally said, wait a minute, you're 100 years old. don't you think Tokyo is an awfully long way to go? And he said, well, when I used to work, it took well over 25 hours to get to Chicago. He says, I don't think Tokyo's a whole lot further than that nowadays. And here's a man who could tell you about one day sitting down to dinner with Henry Ford and Thomas Edison.
Wow.
Now, he was much younger, obviously, and he said he was really looking forward to this dinner and all the learning and insight he'd get from these two men. He said he was excited. He got there a little bit early. Said 5 minutes later, Ford came in and sat down next to him. And about 15 minutes later, Edison came in. Now, Edison was elderly, had one of those big horns for hearing, and sat down opposite. And he said the first thing, Ford turned to Edison and yelled, "My Tom, you look very good." And Edison turned to Ford and yelled, "It's the Carter's little liver pills." This man said all night long, all they did was yell about Carter's little liver pills. And he said next time he wanted to learn something, he went to the library. One more in this vein. We get hundreds of phone calls at the store, people wanting to know, do you have a book? Can you get a book? How does the book exist? Or what's the value? How much is it worth? And so on. And most of those questions, either I or the people I work with, we can answer right off the top of our heads. Some are a little more involved, and occasionally you really have to do some research, but that can be fun too. But every once in a while you get a call that really stands out. And I answered the phone, "Hello, Brattle Bookshop, can I help you?" Lady, very thick Irish brogue, and the first thing she says is, "President Kennedy slept with me." Now, you have to admit that gets your attention. And she went on to explain that she had worked for the Kennedy family, and when he was 2 and 3 years old, he used to fall asleep in her arms. So he did sleep with her, but maybe not what you first thought. And what she had was a whole series of handwritten letters from the president. Now, presidential letters of any type have value, some much more than others, and handwritten letters of later 20th century presidents particularly are hard to get. She wanted to get an offer. I was actually skeptical about that, but I thought she'd be fun to meet. I went to her house. She was great. The letters were really nice. I gave what I thought was a tremendous offer, but much as I suspected, there was no way she could sell these letters. They were part of her life. I left a note behind. As far as I know, her family still has them, probably where they belong. Maybe I'll hear about them someday, who knows. And one of the things that comes up a lot is people will ask me, what's the most valuable thing you've had, or what's one of the rarest, or so on. And first of all, one of the last stories that I'll tell is one of the things that I think is the most valuable book. But I'll tell about a few things that I've either handled in doing appraisals or actually owned or whatever. I do appraisals a lot of times for museums or so on. I got a call from a museum that I'm a member of, and they said, we need an appraisal of this document because we're loaning it to another museum for an exhibit, and there needs to be an insurance policy. And they told me what it was, and I said, look, I'm a member, I'll be happy to do it for free, but I don't want to do it from a copy, I don't want to do it from your website, I want to actually see the item. And they said, sure, just make an appointment, come in. I made an appointment, I was there, and then next thing I had was reading a 4-page handwritten account of Paul Revere's ride by Paul Revere. I mean, that even exists. And and you're reading through, and the British told me to get off my horse or they'd blow my head off. And so, I mean, literally, he wrote it all down a week later. And just to be able to hold and touch and handle something like that, I mean, even though I deal with things like this, it still can send a chill up your spine, and you never know what it's going to be. Another time I got called, actually it was a room somewhat in the same style as this. My manager and I got called. It was, again, to do an appraisal, but nobody had told us what it was going to be. And then there was a folding table in front of us. We went down and looked. There were a couple of documents. One was the Bill of Rights. One was the Pilgrim Charter. And the other one was a printed copy of the Declaration of Independence. It was a year later. It was the first time they actually printed the names of the signers on the document because, first of all, they were traitors. If they didn't win the war, having your name on that document was not the best thing. But written in the top in ink, it said, "This is a true and authentic copy, John Hancock." And I have to admit, I did put my little finger on each one of these. What the story with that was, if you go to the Kennedy Museum in Dorchester, right across the parking lot is the Commonwealth Museum. Well, these were all things. They were about to open that museum, the state, but they had to send these to get a little bit of restoration. And so they wanted an insurance policy for that. And actually, one of the things that I found really interesting about it was not only did I get to touch the Bill of Rights and the Pilgrim Charter and so on, but when the place that they sent those documents up to have the restoration done was in North Andover. And they literally had a state police motorcade going with them up Route 93, and they shut down Route 93 while those documents were on the road, and then got them there, and they did that again on the way back in a motorcade. I mean, can you, in any case, it was a lot of fun and fascinating. And when my daughters were growing up, they're in 30 and 40 now, and when they were growing up, I used to bring things home. And I would say, "Oh, look, here's an Audubon, here's this," and they were pretty nonplussed about it. But in any case, one of the times, and this was just after 9/11, I had bought a group of letters of Thomas Jefferson. And one of the letters said, he was talking about what to do about traitors and terrorists. It was the War of 1812. And he basically said, or he outright said, he said they should get the full protection of the law and absolutely nothing else. And I just felt it fit the time. One of my daughters said, "Well, can I take this for show and tell?" And I said, "Maybe not." But so you again, you never know. Another thing that I get to get asked about every once in a while is, do I collect books? And no, I don't. But when I was growing up, my father used to bring home 5, 6, 7 books a day. Do that for 30 or 40 years, and you can imagine what our house looked. He always meant to read a chapter, an introduction, maybe the dust jacket, and so on, but they just heaped and piled. So I tend to read a lot. I read a lot of history, books about books collecting. I read Stephen King, John Grisham. John Grisham wrote a book called Camino Island. I actually talked with him about it. You should read it. He said because of the book, he owes me a dinner. Unfortunately, I have the inscription that says he owes me a dinner. I haven't gotten the dinner yet. But I do have his cell phone number, so if I'm ever in Charlottesville, I'll call him. But it's about a book theft, and I was portrayed in it. And it was pretty, anyways, read the book. In any case, but so I don't collect books per se. My wife had a collection of over 1,000 books on jazz and roots music. She had some great signed photographs. I mean, the type of things, some of her favorites. One that W.C. Handy inscribed to U.B. Blake. Her favorite one was a marquee, not even a picture, but it was a marquee, and in it was saying, Louis Armstrong and his orchestra are going to play tonight. And then you read down, it said, featuring Billie Holiday. But it was inscribed, to Pops who taught me everything, love Billy, and so on. Now, we were downsizing. We were going to brought some of the collection in. The day we brought it in, one of our colleagues in London saw some of it, said, "I want all those pictures." And Joyce, my wife, said, "Well, we also have 1,000 books." He goes, "We'll drive out to your house." Looked at it. They said, "Fine." They bought it. And then the collection sort of, it was gone. We were thrilled. We were told the person who bought it loved it, but his wife didn't. He had to build a room in the basement for it. And then about a year and a half ago, there was an auction in London, and it was of Charlie Watts, the drummer for the Rolling Stones. And it turns out, we found out he was the one who bought her collection. So it sort of rounded out the whole thing. But that's sort of the fun part. But one of the things that comes up, before dust jackets were widely used, dust jackets started in the early 1800s, but they were literally plain dust jackets. The dust jackets as we know them didn't really start until around World War I, because that's when the printing could get good enough. But before that, there were a lot of books had sort of very nice decorative covers. And one of the reasons they had nice decorative covers was the publishers figured if you walked in the store and the book caught your eye, more of a chance you'd buy the book. And there are people who collect these decorative covers just for the decorative covers. And you can go to the library book sale, the Friends book sale, bookstores, antique stores, and pick a lot of these up very cheaply. There are expensive ones, but you can pick them up cheaply. And individually, they might not seem like much, but as a collection, graphically, they can be quite nice. And we had a collection, or actually still do, have a collection of these ourselves that started out as a bit of a joke. I got a book, had a picture of a toilet on the cover. The title of the book was Flushed with Pride, the Life of Thomas Crapper, who invented the toilet. Anyways, I looked at it, I brought it home, my wife took one look at it and said, we've got to put this in the bathroom. A couple of days later, I got a book like this, but it had a big eye staring out of the cover. The title was We Never Sleep. It was a history of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, but with a big eye staring at you. We thought, we should put this in the bathroom too. Now, this is a little half bathroom with no shower, no steam. Next thing you know, we built bookshelves, and now there are about 300 or 400 of these Victorian-style illustrated books in the bathroom. People walk in, they're a little taken aback, but loads of reading material. And one of the rules of the collection is that nothing can be valuable, because every once in a while a book will fall off the shelf, and you can imagine where it ends up. Another thing I collect, and there is no way you're going to be able to see this, but I'll just give it as an example. There's page after page of lines of writing, either a word, a phrase, a sentence. Every single one of these is a story. And I could literally probably put that on a wall. I won't do this, by the way, for anyone at the library. And then throw dots at it and do a whole talk just that way. And there are some interesting ones. I mean, I told a few. Well, actually, when we talk about collecting, you never know where a collection is going to go or where it's going to come from. We had a man who had one of the best collections of atlases and histories of Europe. And the reason that he started his collection was he bought a postcard. And the postcard was somewhere in Central Europe. And it said where it was. Now, just think about this. If you're, well, first of all, Europe, the countries change, the borders change, the names change. You know, if you had a postcard from the 1920s that said Scully Square, and that's all it said, well, if you're from Boston, you might know. But otherwise, it can be hard. So what he did is he started collecting postcards, but then he wanted to know where they all were. So he started collecting atlases. He started collecting travel guides. I mean, from the 1890s up. He collected maps. He collected histories. And he had one of the largest collections and best collections on travel guides, maps, and so on of Europe. And then he'd also go to a lot of these places. His business that he was in had him traveling, and he would and he would try to go to these towns. So out of a couple of postcards was this fascinating collection that made traveling for him and everything much more fun. So that's one of them. There's one story here in this, and then I'll talk a little bit about Antiques Roadshow. A lot of times we go out to houses. Literally, we go out just about every weekday to houses. People call up. They have an estate. They're moved. The main reason people sell books is either they're older and they're downsizing, or it's an estate and someone's passed on. And we get calls all day long at the store. People call up. The first question we ask, well, about how many books do you have? And usually the first answer is a lot. And then we say, okay, well, we try to narrow it down a little. And then we ask, what kind of books do you have? And they go, fiction and nonfiction, which is every book ever done. So we try to narrow that down a little. And actually, nowadays, what's really made it so much easier is if you had a wall of books here, I'd say just take some digital pictures of the wall. If we can see the spines, in many cases, we can tell, yes, this is something we're going to go out on, this is something that you draw, or we can look at it and say the third book from the right on the second shelf down, we've got to see that. Matter of fact, I was just doing some for the friends, and I was explaining, line them up like that, take a picture, and probably 95% of it we can do. But in any case, we go out almost every day, but every once in a while, you're about to go out, someone will call and postpone. And life happens, health, childcare, business, whatever, and you postpone and reschedule. And it's a little frustrating just because you blocked out that time to do the appraisal or do the buy, and you can't do it. We had a friend, and this was 25 years ago. He ran into a little bit of problems financially. He needed to sell some of his books. And he had a storage area in Cambridge, in a very nice storage area. It had lights, it had electricity in each unit. And anyways, we set up an appointment. He called and he postponed. We rescheduled, he called and postponed. We rescheduled, he called, postponed. After 4 times, I said, Russ, if you postpone again, I don't care what you have, I am not going to go out. Anyways, the 5th time we set up the appointment, that morning he calls, I've got to postpone. It's not my fault. And he went on to explain that a lady next to him had a storage area, and it actually was a sad story. About 20 years before that, she had an alcoholic, abusive husband who ran out on the family. The night before we had the appointment, she was literally on her deathbed, and her daughter was with her, and she said to her daughter, I want you to go tomorrow. I have a storage area in Cambridge. I want you to go to that storage area. In the storage area, you'll find a freezer. In the freezer, you'll find your father. She had murdered him 20 years earlier, put him in a freezer, put him in the storage area. And I said, Russ, okay. And it was on the news. I mean, it really did happen. So, again, you never know. Like I say, I hope all of you watch Antiques Roadshow. I've done it for about 25 years. One of the reasons I want everybody to watch it is, first of all, it's fun and I like it. But the more people who watch it, the better the ratings. The better the ratings, the more likely they are to get renewed. We've already taped next year's shows. They start in January. 2027 might be more of a challenge just because of funding and so on. But the way that show works is about 3,000 to 4,000 people come to a show. And they do them around the country. And wherever the show is, we go. Now, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about the Antiques Roadshow is the appraisers don't get paid at all. We don't get hotel, plane, travel, food, but it's PBS. But what we do get is and there's no guarantee you're going to get on TV either. But what we do get is if you do get on TV, there's about 4+ million people who watch the show. Also, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I've been to every state now. I'm very fortunate that my wife usually can come with me. We usually can go 2 or 3 days early, so we actually get to see the places. And everywhere you go in this country, if you make any type of effort at all, it's beautiful, the people are wonderful. Do not talk about politics and religion, so it's a lot of fun to do. But the way it's set up and the way it works is they give out about 3,000 to 4,000 tickets in a lottery. Each ticket or person can bring 2 items. So 6,000 to 8,000 items come in a day. And you usually appraise whatever the city is from about 7 in the morning, sometimes almost to 6, 7 at night, almost nonstop. And the people who get the tickets, many times they travel a long way to get there. They've won the lottery, but you get the show. And then what happens is we have no guarantee that we're going to get on TV. It's not. There are a couple of things that are done early just so they can start taping early, but for 99% of what's on TV, it's not staged. You don't know what's coming. You don't know how it's going to go. And if you tape something early in the day, well, that's great, because the ideal for an appraiser is someone comes in at 8 or 9 in the morning, you see what it is, you ask them about it, they don't know too much about it, you call a producer over, the producer talks to you, talks to them out of earshot, and says, okay, tape it. By 9:30, 10, you've taped something. That makes the rest of the day simple. But if at around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you haven't taped, there's a good chance you won't, and that's what you're there for. But I remember there was one city, it was Kansas City, and a man came in, and he had a few things. It was about 10 in the morning, 9 or 10. Had a few things from Pope John Paul. He had some rosary beads. He had a few little things signed. But there really wasn't a whole lot to it. But then he started pulling out some photographs. And it got a lot more interesting. It turned out he was the pilot who flew the Pope and his entourage around the country in the 70s. And then he started telling stories about what was going on behind the scenes and so on. I mean, it was getting really interesting. And then he had one photo in particular that got my interest. Usually when you see the Pope with a person, it's a very formal photograph. Usually the Pope has his ring out, people are kneeling, they kiss the ring, they get a picture, and that's usually what you get with that. This was totally different. The pilot was in his pilot's uniform, sitting in the cockpit in the pilot seat. The Pope was in his full vestments, but, well, in order to do this, the Pope literally had his leg in the air. He was reaching over, signing the Bible. And I'm going, oh, this is great. This is fabulous. And I said, okay, let me see the Bible. And he goes, oh, I didn't bring that. And I went, can you go get it? And he goes, it was a Saturday. He says, no, it's in a bank vault. I can't do that. And it was like, oh. Now, I did end up taping something a little later in the day, but it was like, oh. And but you never know what you're going to see, what you're going to get. And then my wife did appraisals for a couple of years, and she didn't enjoy standing there or being there for 10 or 12 hours and so on. It's just not what she likes. So she only did it a year or two. But when you come to groups like this doing what I do, or at the store or at the Antiques Roadshow, 99 or 95, 98% of the people are happy. I mean, when you do this, you always worry that, okay, someone comes in, they have something worth 10, 20, 50, $100,000. You tell them that, yeah, they're going to be happy. But what do you do when someone comes in and they have something that's not terribly valuable? And then when I first started doing this, I was worried about that. You have all sorts of ways of saying it and saying it nicely. But what it turns out is 90% of the people, you tell them that, well, it's sentimentally valued, it doesn't have, I'm really happy. They go, great. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. I can give it to the grandchildren. I can give it to the library book sale. I can read it. You know, and it's just, you sort of relieve them and they're happy. But anyways, my wife was doing an Antiques Roadshow. You do have that 1% or more that no matter what you say, no matter how you say it, no matter what you do, they're not going to be happy. Anyway, she was doing the Antiques Roadshow, and again, you take into account these people have won the lottery, even though it's free, and gotten tickets. Some of them drive 500, 1,000 miles to go to the show. You get to the show, you wait in line, and you go to what they call triage, which is 6 or 8 appraisers who don't appraise, but they say, okay, you go to music, you go to art, you go to prints, you go to posters, you go to books. So you wait in that line. Then you go to the next line, which is the book table, let's say. And there are 3 book appraisers next to the music appraisers, next to the poster appraisers, next to, and there are about 75 appraisers. But anyway, so you wait in another line, and you know, a lot of times I could look down the line and go, crap, crap, crap. Oh, wait a minute, I want to see your, you know, but you don't do that because the people have put in an effort. You want to be very nice to everybody. Anyways, my wife was doing this, and a lady came in and she put down a book and she goes, this is signed by A. Lincoln. And my wife took the book very nicely, looked at it, and you know, spent a little bit of time and said, yes, it is signed by A. Lincoln, just not the A. Lincoln we both want it to be. And the lady in this tone sort of goes, how can you tell? And my wife, first of all, the first thing she does is she turns to the title page and she says, well, the first clue is this book was printed in 1911. And the lady goes, so? And my wife said, well, I've learned when I'm in school that he was assassinated in 1865. Lady slams the book closed, goes, you don't know what you're talking about. But when somebody wants to believe something, and they want to believe it so much, reasoning doesn't enter into it. They're going to believe what it is. And quite honestly, even myself, there are times when I get something in, and I want it to be what I want it, you know, either the signature's right or the addition's and I want that. Sometimes I catch myself and I say, I better contact a colleague of mine and double check. And you don't have to know everything. Matter of fact, nobody ever knows everything. And if you did, it would be boring. But all I really need to know is who does know and be on good enough terms with them that they'll answer my questions. And so a lot of times, you know, I'll double check and so on. But you really can run. If someone's convinced, there's nothing you can say. I'll tell you what, at this point, I can go on and on and on. Why don't I see if there are a few questions? And quite honestly, anything you ask me, I can go off on a tangent. So I'll do in the back there.
So what is the most valuable thing you've appraised on Antiques Roadshow?
Well, the most valuable thing was something by a signed photo of Lincoln that was one of the highest, it was in the $100,000 range. But one of the most, there are a lot of interesting things. I'll tell 2 quick ones. Someone came in and they had an arts and craft box. You know, they went to the arts and craft table. It was, I guess, really nice, but it was a few $100s. In the bottom of the box was a few papers. So they brought it over to me to look at what the papers were. At the bottom, there was a 4-page letter of a soldier who was he was sick, he had dysentery and so on, but he was in the hospital in Washington. And it was just a normal letter saying, how is Aunt so-and-so, who's this person, what, please write to me, and on and on and on for 4 pages, which was nice and all that. But at the very end of the letter, there was a little parenthesis saying, written by his friend Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman used to volunteer in the hospitals, and if soldiers were either too sick or illiterate, he would write out so this was a 4-page handwritten letter in the hand of Walt Whitman. And those letters are particularly valuable because by the Civil War, Walt Whitman was very well known in the literary circles. And if you knew him and he wrote you a letter, a lot of people would save them. But these soldiers, you know, they didn't necessarily read the newest poetry. Their families didn't. So a lot of those letters didn't get saved and held and so on. So that was one of the things. But, you know, sometimes there was one of mine on, that was just done. It was only done on the streaming. But a lady had books signed by Nancy Drew, the author. But what a lot of people don't realize, Carolyn Keene is a pen name. And the author who actually wrote the Nancy Drew books was, by contract, not allowed to sign them because they didn't want anyone to know who she was and so on. And finally, a lady who was a lawyer got her out of the contract. She had the first signed book. But what amazed me even more, she had written those books for 60 years. Her daughter didn't know that she wrote the Nancy Drew books. And that was also in the... So, you know, it's about the stories. There, you know, going back, one other one that I really liked was a man came in with a photograph, and maybe some of you know this photograph. It was done in the 1970s. It was the desegregation. There was Ted Landsmark, a black man, walked into it, and there was the flag. In any case, that was in Sarasota. I appraised it, but it was one of the interesting things is, usually when you're appraising for Antiques Roadshow, you know, it's something that they found in the trash, they found in the attic, they found it's 500 years old. Well, I mean, not only did I know the photograph, I knew where it was done, I knew the photographer. And about a month later, I was at a funeral, and he was sitting behind me. He had won the Pulitzer. And I said, Stanley, I appraised one of your photographs for the Antiques Roadshow. And he goes, oh, what did you appraise it at? I said, $3,000. He went, not enough. And so it was one of the times that I enjoy, there might be a few coming up where the people involved in the appraisal were actually involved in the items. Because then you can say, well, what was this person like? How did you get this done? What was it? Why did they write this? So I like some of those, and I've got a few of them. Any other? Well,
Getting back to John Hancock, where
Yeah.
he verified,
yeah.
was the signature on the top of the page as big and bold as on the original?
Probably bigger.
Oh, really?
It was a big signature. Did John Hancock sign it? Yes. He wanted everybody to see it and so on, and it was very interesting. Matter of fact, the other thing that was very interesting about that copy of the Declaration, not only was it the first one to have the names printed on it, but it was printed by a woman in Baltimore. And just to have a woman printer at the time was unusual. I saw, yes.
In the online world, how is your bookstore working, you know, with, you know, so many booksellers, also online?
The question is with the online world, and what I'm going to do is I see the time's getting on a little. I'll take this as the last question, but when I'm doing, if people have personal questions, I'll answer them informally. Online, and this I could do an hour or more, and I assure you I'm not going to. It's changed a lot of things. First of all, one of the things is just some types of books that people don't need. People nowadays don't tend to buy books if they just want the knowledge in the books. I mean, do you buy a dictionary anymore? Do you buy encyclopedias? Art books. The main reason people buy art books is so they can see all the pictures. Quite honestly, if you have a nice computer screen, the pictures are better. I had a friend who retired, and he thought, in retirement, he wanted to take up tennis. We went up in the store and looked, and we had a few books on how to play tennis, and he had said, you know, YouTube's better, because you could actually see and follow. So books that used to get a lot of money have come way down because you don't need them. You don't need the knowledge in them. It's a better way, and that changes. The other thing that happens is there were a lot of books that 30 years ago were high-priced, quote, rare. They actually weren't that rare. They were just hard to get. And so if you walked into a store, someone might say, gee, that's a little bit high-priced, but I'm going to buy it because I might need that a year or two from now, and I'm not going to be able to get it. You know, the idea of the pictures you see of the professors or the scholars, he or she sitting with piles of books all around them so that they could reach up and go, oh, the Battle of Waterloo was this date or that. Well, you don't need those anymore either. But a lot of those, quote, rare books, when the internet came out, you realized they weren't really rare. Again, they just were hard to get. Now, books that maybe were $100, $200, $300, now you go online, all you do is click, click, and you find out there are 50 or 100 copies available, you know, which brings the price way down. And people come into me a lot of times and they say, well, I have these books on the internet. It's priced from about $5 to $100, so about 50 should be about right. And I go, wait a minute. If they're all about the same, are you going to buy the $50 copy or the $5 copy? You know, assuming there's not any major. So what it tends to do is bring it to the lowest denominator. The other thing is when people call up and they say they've looked things up, what I tell them to do first, or if they want to get values, first of all, I'll look at their books, I'll look at the pictures that I say to send, I'll look at the list, and what a lot of times I'll do is if people want to check, I'll say, look, spend your time on this one, this one, this one, and this one, because they're really the rare ones. But I understand people want to double check. I mean, but the first thing to check when you look online is not the price, it's how many. The minute you start getting over 5 or 10 available copies, you can get it, and it brings the price down. In order to sell a book online, there are 3 things that have to be. It either has to be the cheapest copy, the best copy, or the only copy. Other than that, you're fighting against many, many things online, and you really do it. Now, I'm going to end the talk with 2 last stories, and then I'll be done, and I'll so on. I mentioned the most valuable book that I've dealt with or so on, and there is a copy, it's from like the 1970s or 80s, and this is an appropriate time to talk about it, The Night Before Christmas. It's a very nicely done, very nicely illustrated copy of The Night Before Christmas. That copy of The Night Before Christmas I have read to my children every single Christmas Eve from the time they were born. Now, they're late 30, early 40 now. There are 4 grandchildren. I have read it to them every single, the oldest is 5, so every single Christmas Eve. And to the point where one of my daughters is married to a man from Texas. Now, I think they're very smart. They live around here. But a lot of times, Christmas time, they'd go to Texas. Before FaceTime, I actually recorded myself reading it on YouTube so my daughter could have me reading it to her. My other daughter, the one who lives here is fine. My other daughter lives in Nairobi. And her oldest kid is, well, he's going to be 4 in a few days. But in order to read it to them on FaceTime, first of all, you've got an 8-hour difference. So on Christmas Eve, and then you've got 4-year-olds who go to bed at like 7 o'clock. So I actually have to read it the night before Christmas, the day before Christmas. But that copy of The Night Before Christmas means more to me than almost any other book. Matter of fact, one of my daughters keeps it. I recently, and actually this is something that's on our website, so on. I recently did a segment on Saturday morning, CBS Saturday Morning. And they did a great job, so you can listen to it, CBS Saturday Morning. But I wanted to bring that book and tell that story. I had to ask my daughter's permission. Can I bring it out of your house to the store to have it on national TV? And she said, okay, but I want it back immediately. She's afraid that I'll sell it. or actually, she's afraid I'll lose it. In any case, the time's getting there. Why don't I say thank you very much? Now, the way I do appraisals is anyone has any books, I'll go in the back, or are you going to do a little entertainment?
Yeah.
So why don't I just stay here? I'll get done with it really.
No, we're just gonna have refreshments.
Okay, so I'll just in the back.
Yeah,
So please,
Thank
first, I just want to say one other thing, though. Thank you so much, Ken.
Well, thank you.
And I want to please, some very entertaining stories. We appreciate seeing you on the Antiques Roadshow.
And I'll say one other thing. If you have books and you want to ask and they're not here, or don't ever feel you're bothering myself, the people I work with. Call, ask. We'd rather have 100 people have something that's not of any value than to have the 101st person say, I just threw away a whatever.
And I also want to promote the bookstores on West Street downtown Boston. So if you haven't been there, you should make a trip in to see it. And one interesting thing about the bookstore, besides having 250,000 books, I believe that's what it still is.
Well, it's a little less, but close.
But also they have an open air book sale on the side.
And also I do a podcast. Brattlecast is about 220-minute, these type of stories. But yeah, no, come in,
So
visit.
it's worth going down for.
Yeah.
So again, Ken, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're very honored that you came to Walpole. Yeah.
I'll go in back. If anyone has any questions, whatever.
So-
Thank you.
So what we're going to do now